7 years, can anybody point to anything that is better in the province of British Columbia?
Some of the most hateful candidates we've ever seen run in a BC election.
Here's the lay of the land. You've got NDP leader David Eby trying to hang on to government, challenged from the right by BC Conservative leader John Rustad, a guy whose party won less than 2% of the vote last time. It's close, controversial, and so very BC.
There is something really different happening here in the BC political scene.
BC, NDP.
Where else but beautiful British Columbia?
We got him, here we go, guys.
Would a provincial election feature the outrage of an iconic environmentalist?
But for heaven's sakes, what is a big picture?
And the outrage of a billionaire leggings baron. Lululemon founder Chip Wilson keeps putting signs outside his mansion, here calling the NDP government communist.
It might actually be the TSN quote-unquote turning point for this election.
It's a new dawn in BC.
And there's even a heckler dressed as a cockroach.
As unique as BC politics is, what's happening here is aligned with political shifts in the rest of the country and much of the world. Voters are angry and change curious.
And rent is expensive. Like, a lot of people have to look in West Van and they're thinking like $2,000, $2,500.
We've had murders downtown Nanaimo here that were very gruesome, and I don't think that Nanaimo is the same city that I grew up in.
It's inflation and what it's doing to our fixed incomes and our savings.
But this election is actually really important.
Kate Hammer is the host of the daily election podcast Hotel Pacifico.
Well, it's sort of exciting. I feel like we wake up every morning, I get up at 5 a.m. to find out what happened overnight, and there's always something exciting to talk about.
She says the drama of the campaign comes from conservative momentum.
That really is the story of this election. It's really unprecedented in Canadian politics to have a party go from no elected members in the legislature, and in fact, having not elected a member to the legislature in decades, to potentially forming government in the course of really just over a year, right?
Here's how it happened. BC used to have a party called the BC Liberals, not like the federal Liberals, more center-right. That was the party that was in power for 16 years under Premiers Gordon Campbell and Christy Clark. But that Liberal brand started to get problematic. They didn't want to be associated with this guy. So the BC Liberals rebranded to become BC United. It didn't work.
Who's ready to spike the hike?
In the meantime, the federal opposition Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre started to gain in popularity, campaigning for seats in British Columbia. His messages about cost of living, carbon tax, and public safety seemed to resonate with voters, popularity that rubbed off on Rustad.
It was just something they could harness and ride. They didn't have to do much, and for a long time we saw John Rustad and the BC Conservatives getting more and more popular without a lot of recognition or knowledge of John Rustad himself.
This fight would have continued right into the campaign.
In August, BC United suspended its campaign, making this a two-man race for premier. The Conservative momentum pushed the incumbent NDP to the right, backtracking on drug decriminalization and promising to expand involuntary mental health and addiction care. Surprise policy shifts in a platform that also promises affordable housing and better health care.
Who is John Rustad?
The NDP spent much of this campaign pointing out Rustad's past. He used to be a BC Liberal, but he was kicked out for his views on climate change. He's also questioned COVID-19 vaccines.
I am not anti-vax, I am anti-mandate. I believe that people should have choice. It shouldn't be thrust upon them or forced upon them or coerced to be able to take a vaccine.
Rustad has stood behind controversial candidates, including the one running in South Surrey, who apologized for social media posts he made a decade ago, referring to Palestinians as inbred.
So the vetting machinery wasn't there. But how much that's sticking with the electorate, how much they care about what one guy said on Twitter 10 years ago versus who's going to look after me and this affordability crunch that I'm feeling, that remains to be seen.
A few days out, here's how close it is. Polling aggregator 338 has the BC Conservatives and the NDP in a tie for the popular vote, giving the NDP an edge in projected seat count. But look at that line. Greens could make a difference here.
It's fascinating to me that John Rustad's vision for this province is one that's rooted somewhere around 1957.
Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau had a strong debate. Her party could win a seat or two. Also, there are 6 incumbent MLAs running as independents. That's a wild card.
It is close enough that a relatively small number of voters and a relatively small number of ridings could turn this.
Big question, where will those centrist voters go? Will they choose change or stick with the status quo? Whatever happens in BC could foreshadow what's to come in an upcoming federal campaign.